The Culpepper Cattle Company is a 1972 western directed by Dick Richards.
It's the story of a young kid who has dreams of being a cowboy in 1866, I think it's set, isn't it? He asks Frank Culpepper of the title if he can join his cattle drive from, I think it's from Texas up to Colorado, I think. Yeah, he has a sort of romantic vision of what being a cowboy is. So yeah, it's basically the story of this cattle drive and what happens on the way. And they encounter rustlers who try and steal the cows, horse thieves trying to steal the horses, and trappers that take everything off this kid.
Landowners, greedy landowners, yep.
Yeah, so, some sort of typical Western staples. And yeah, I mean, this is what's called a revisionist Western, which kind of came out in sort of the 60s and 70s, because a lot of Westerns before that did have a sort of romantic view of that period. Good guys and bad guys, usually, cowboys and Native Americans. It was very black and white, whereas it wasn't really like that, obviously. Most people had guns and just killed each other over not a lot. I mean, for example, rustling, stealing cows was punishable by hanging. If you caught somebody doing it, then you could, because you're in the middle of nowhere, you're basically within your rights to just shoot them on the spot. So yeah, and it takes that sort of view of things. There's not a lot of conversation that goes on, between these people. They just shoot each other until one of them's dead. And that's it. And of course, this kid, his romantic view of this life is quickly eroded, and he realises that actually it's quite a hard life. And the reason that all these guys look, weathered and are a bit grumpy is because, it's not, it's not fun, but, they've got to earn a living, and that's what they do. And all the trials and tribulations they face on the way. It's hard enough just moving these cattle across hundreds of miles without all these problems that they encounter.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, good.
You did a lot of good research there, and I was going to say some of that, but I don't need to now. But
sorry.
No, it's just great. It's cool. I think you're right. I think this it feels very realistic. This film.
Yeah.
And I think it's. I mean, it's not a very well. I mean, we were saying a few weeks ago that we'd never actually done a Western.
No.
This is our first Western on the channel, and I've never been the biggest Western fan. I've watched a lot of the. I've seen quite a few of the classic. My mum was a big fan of Westerns, so growing up I always watched like The Magnificent Seven and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly and Far Country, and I watched a lot of like James Stewart films growing up, and obviously that's kind of that kind of idealistic traditional view of the Western. Although we never really watched John Wayne, but then the revisionist, this thing like you said, came along in the 60s, 70s. So I suppose in a way Clint Eastwood films would possibly fall under that hat. Yeah. And then of course things like The Wild Bunch by Peckinpah, and even modern day ones. I think the Jesse James, the Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. I think those are kind of.
I mean, I think all modern westerns are pretty much revisionist because they don't. They're not like the westerns from like the 30s and the 40s.
No, exactly. Like they show the violence for what it is. Violence,
Hateful Eight, Revenant, things like that.
Yeah, they're all those films are very much inspired by the 70s and 60s kind of films of the time, and so it's dirty, it's nasty. It's, poor people are poor and violent people are violent, and that's kind of what's going on. I mean, America's famous for obviously there's the constant gun talk, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not American, but that's obviously an issue whether you for them or not. I mean, America has always been that kind of the land of the gun owner and the cowboy, and it's almost like the Old West has always existed out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, obviously in those days, everyone did have one, so you kind of did need one to protect your property and yourself.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people argue that you still need that these days. Whether you do, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
but,
it's the kind of the fear of the rising up of people in power, which I suppose in those days was a fear, and maybe is a fear nowadays, but who knows? I mean, it's probably not quite as it was that back then, but
I don't know how much good a rifle is against a jet, but
a load
of missiles, but
who knows? A nuclear bomb against a handgun. Yeah, if the army rose up and took over now, you'd probably be outnumbered.
Well,
You're not going to survive
it would be tough.
It would be tough, but who are we to talk? We're little old British guys with no guns at all.
No.
So swords. Quite an unknown film, this, but I think people who've seen it really like it. I mean, it seems to have a lot of quite good reviews online, and mostly down to it feeling very realistic. There's a great scene at the beginning. We spoke when we did Scarecrow a couple of weeks ago. I said there are certain things I've often thought work well with cinema. Trains look good on cinema. Cars, big, especially American muscle cars, look really good. And horses. And there's actually a scene right near the beginning of this film where they all kind of saddle up, they gear up. And it's just, I mean, it's got some beautiful cinematography, this film. And there's this very short sequence, like a montage, and they're like getting on their horses, and then they're putting like their bullets in their guns, and they're putting on their belt buckles, and things like that. And it just feels like they're kind of ready to go to work.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really nice sequence. It's one of my favourite kind of sequences in a film, actually. It's filmed well and it looks nice, and you got that the sunset kind of glaring off a metallic buckle. I don't know. I know. Anyway, so yeah, that's
Good.
just my weird fetish of cinema. That I think what's really great about this film, it's there's no stars in it. I mean, it's like a cast of really good support actors. There's some really great. You probably recognise quite a lot of the faces.
There's a lot of
this.
faces that you recognise.
You've got people like Geoffrey Lewis is in there, and Askew, and lots of people that have been in westerns a lot during their lives. There's a guy near the end of it, Anthony James, who plays this kind of preacher guy in it called Nathaniel, and he, I think, he's quite famous for playing. He often plays villains or quite creepy, sleazy villains in westerns, and here he's very kind of the opposite of that. Almost. So it's kind of full of people who are very kind of well versed in the Western world, in the kind of cowboy world.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I think towards the end it kind of fell into the sort of usual Western tropes with the greedy landowner and final shootout and things like that. So I felt a little bit let down by that because it felt a bit too after what had gone before. I thought it strayed into sort of overly familiar territory, but no. Apart from that, it seemed to portray a sort of genuine version of the Old West. So I enjoyed it.
Watch it for the character acting. Watch it for these great, not stars, but those kind of guys you see off in the backs of these films, and they're kind of getting more of a centre role, and watch it for that. So it's available on DVD. I've actually got it on Blu-ray. I picked it up. Got it in FOP. I think I bought this a few months ago because it's one of those films I wanted to have. It's by Signal One Entertainment. It's got some features on there. I mean, I also quite like the intro of the film at the beginning shows lots of photographs of the cast, but they're kind of done vintagely, so they're kind of that sepia toned black and white. There were a couple of Western photographers. There was Robert G. McGubbin was one, and then William Henry Jackson, I think that's the other guy, and they were both quite. Robert McGubbin, I've seen his work before, and he took lots of photographs of cowboys in that period,
right.
And the typical kind of if you go watch a film like a Back to the Future, when they have that vintage photograph taken, they all look like that. They all seem to just be posing for photographs. I mean, obviously in those days you had to stand very still to pose for a photograph. But they all look quite a little bit sinister. A lot of gangs seem to like having their photographs taken, and the beginning of the film kind of has that. So it kind of brings you into the film quite nicely, I thought, in that regard. Shows these kind of old vintage feeling, and a lot of the time you look at them and you're like, are they old photographs?
I think some of them are. Yeah,
they're kind of a mixture of actual ones with cast photographs as well. Okay, that works quite well, I think. And then right at the end of the film, you've got. I don't think it's that picture, but there's a picture of all of them at the end, and so it's nice, and it looks good. It's nice,
the picture was good. I mean,
nice.
there's quite a heavy grain on some scenes, which suggests they haven't sort of tried to digitally smooth it or anything, so that's always a good sign.
So that was the Culpepper Cattle Company, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there if you like what you've watched, and don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over there. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and come back next week for another video.